Okay, so you should have in front of you, for tonight at least, the master personal ending chart, which looks like this. And then the other one is the present active indicative handout, which looks like that. Everybody have those? What I want to do is just actually cover some of the basics of the English grammar as it pertains to verbs. I'm going to wait and cover the Greek side of this chapter, and really I want to roll it into chapter 16 because we're going to cover all that stuff in chapter 16 anyway, so I'd rather just cover it one time. All right? So in chapter 15, Mounce wants to make sure that we at least have a basic orientation towards verbs in our own language. And so a lot of this may seem very simple, but sometimes we lack the terminology for discussing Greek grammar because we lack the terminology for our English grammar. And so we do want to make sure that we're all on the same page, at least on some of the terms and what they mean. All right? So first of all, he talks about verbs and what verbs are. Basically, verbs are parts of speech. They're words in a language that indicate a state of being, an emotional state, a mental state, or an action or an activity. Okay? So he uses the examples, I am studying Greek. So here, studying is our verb. It's got a helping verb or an auxiliary verb, as you might call the form of am here. Greek is the heavenly language. Is not an action, but it is a verb, right? And this would be referred to in many grammars as a copular verb or a linking verb. But whatever the case, it is the verb in the sentence. Now, verbs are characterized by a number of features, and we want to make sure that we understand what we mean by these terms for these features. So we have person, and we have number, okay? Now, what's a little bit confusing about discussing person and number is the fact that when we ask what person a verb's form is, the answer is going to be first, second, or third. And first, second, and third, well, those are numbers, aren't they? But number doesn't mean first, second, or third. The number, if we're asking about what a verb's number is singular versus plural, okay? So let's talk about these concepts. What does first person mean when we talk about first person verbs? I. Good. So I is first person, and what number is I? Singular. Okay, so I is first person singular. What about first person plural? Okay, good. So that would be we, right? And when we're talking about verbs have as their subject either some entity that is first, second, or third person. So I or we is first, singular, plural is the number. What about second person? Okay, good. So you a second person. And that's singular. What's our plural form of you? Oh, okay, yes, there are many varieties, right? You or y'all or you guys, and we could go on ad infinitum. All right. So this is the most basic distinction in languages, and all languages have a first person versus a second person distinction. Okay? There are some languages that don't really have a formal third person. They borrow third person forms from somewhere else in the language, usually the demonstratives, if they don't have their own third person pronouns. Greek does have third person pronouns. They do behave differently than the first and second ones. But what are our third person singular pronouns? He, she, and it. Good. And if it's plural? They. Okay, so third person and plural. If something is neither the speaker, which is who first person refers to, nor the addressee, you, which is who second person refers to, then of necessity it's in the third person category. Third person is the catch-all. anybody besides I, we, and you, y'all. Okay? So if I had a sentence like this, I love peanut butter. Okay? The verb in whatever language I'm speaking would need to be what person, if it's marked for person? First. That's right. If I say, on the other hand, Moses, and I want to use the same verb, okay? What person is that verb form? It's third. How do I know it's third? That's right. That's right. If I were to replace Moses with a pronoun, I would use a third person pronoun, wouldn't I? And is it Moses loved peanut butter? No, it's loves. And this is one of the things about English that makes it different from Greek, Hebrew, Spanish, and lots of other languages, is that in English, our verb forms really aren't very highly inflected. They don't have many changes to the ending to indicate the subject. Whereas in Greek, we have 6 different endings to mark these 6 categories here, right? And every ending is indicative of that. With English, we only mark the third singular in the present tense with that S, and otherwise all the other forms are the same. So you can consider that a blessing or a curse. All right. So that's person and number. And on the matter of agreement, it's simply the concept there is that in language, the subject and the verb must agree in person and number if there is agreement marking for it. And like I said, in English, there's really not much of that in the present tense. It's just the addition of S to mark agreement with third singular. Otherwise, there are no agreement features. But the verb to be, okay, the verb to be in English, there you do see a lot of variation among the present tense forms in order to have agreement with the right person and number, right? So if I want to say I, for example, do I say I be? I are? No, it's I am, but you are. Okay? And he is. So here, right off the bat, we have 3 different forms of the verb to be, all of them dictated by the necessity of agreeing with the subject. Okay? So that's an important feature of languages. Time, 15.6. This refers to the when the action of the verb takes place. If we want to really be a bit more precise, time has to do with the matter of when the action of the verb takes place relative to the speaker speaking of the action. Okay, so the point of reference is always the speaker speaking. So for example, if I'm talking now to you and I say, Billy ate lunch at what's that new pizza place? The Blaze pizza place, okay? The eating that Billy undertook is sometime before my utterance of Billy ate, okay? So the point of orientation is the speaker. If I say, Billy will eat at Blaze Pizza, then that means that at the time I uttered it, sometime after that is when Billy will do it. And if I say something like Billy is eating at the pizza place, then the point of orientation is my saying it, so that means that his eating is contemporaneous with it. Okay? Get it? All right. Now, here's where it can get confusing. If I have a sentence like, Jesus said, quote, I will come for you. The I will come for you is future, isn't it? But it's future with respect to what? Jesus speaking it, okay? It may be that future tense verb was fulfilled in the past from when I'm talking about it, right? So for example, let me not say, I will come to you. If I had something like, the Apostle John said, I will go to the city with you tomorrow, okay? When did John go to the city with him? Well, sometime in the past, right? But from the perspective of John saying it, it was future relative to that, okay? So when we're thinking about the timing of verbs and their relationship to other things, the point of orientation is the speaker speaking, or the time of the utterance, all right? Now, tense, as Mounce points out here, is used to refer to both the time when an action takes place and the form of the word. So we have things like present tense verbs and past tense verbs. And we have really complicated things like, future perfect tense verbs and things like that. Those all refer to verbal forms when we speak of those sorts of things. And it's going to be important for us to be careful that we distinguish things like time and tense. And Mounce does a good job of making that plea. Because in Greek, tense forms will be chosen, but for times that you don't always expect them to be, for the location and time. And we'll talk about those as we come to them. Now, 15.8, we deal with a concept called aspect. And aspect is a bit difficult because we don't grammaticalize aspect in English. And so we don't really have a grammatical category for it that we're constantly working with. Some languages do. I studied Russian in college, and Russian has an aspect system. And you could use a form of a verb to indicate that you were in the process of doing something. You could use a slightly different form of the verb to indicate that you had say, gone somewhere and actually come back, as opposed to we're still going somewhere. And those were interesting distinctions, and I didn't realize that when I got to Greek would have something not exactly the same, but similar. Aspect really has to do with how the action is being portrayed by the speaker, okay? So some people will try to describe aspect in terms of what the nature of the action is. But really, the speaker has a choice to use a particular verb form to indicate the nature of the action. So I prefer to think of aspect not simply as how someone perceives the action, but rather how someone portrays the action, okay? So aspect has to do with the portrayal of the action of the verb, okay? And one can portray the action as it were from within the verb, within the action, thinking of it in terms of something that is in progress over time, or can simply portray the action as a complete action, a whole action, without reference to any kind of internal characteristics of it. And I want to give you a couple of examples of this to maybe help you conceptualize the difference between different notions of aspect. I can talk about how my son, who's starting college this year, likes to play basketball. And throughout most of his junior high and all of his high school years, he was an avid basketball player. So if I wanted to describe his basketball playing in the past, there's really two ways I could do it. I could say something like, JP was playing basketball. Okay? And I could just as well say, JP played basketball. Those are both past time actions, aren't they? And notice that his playing basketball is all one thing, but my choice to describe it as John Philip or JP was playing basketball versus JP played basketball It's a choice I'm making on how to portray the action. Okay? So if you hear me say JP was playing basketball, what does that make you think? Well, yeah, and you're conceptualizing that action as something that was continuous or in progress, right? In fact, I wouldn't really use that type of a sentence unless I was going to tell you what happened when he was engaging in that action, right? You would expect another sentence like John Philip was playing basketball when a 300-pound guy ran over him. Okay? As opposed to JP played basketball. That's just a simple summary snapshot action that doesn't commit you to conceive of the action in any other way, right? It's a very simplistic sort of portrayal. And this is going to be the difference when we get to Greek between imperfect tense forms that use imperfective aspect and aorist forms, okay, which are really less marked and don't try to get you to view the action in any other way than just a simple, complete summary snapshot action. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. Mounce likes to divide this between what he describes as completed aspect and continuous aspect. Now, I would just make one other comment about continuous aspect. I don't think that tells the whole story, because you can use imperfective aspect verbs to talk about things not that were ongoing or in process, but also things that happened on a regular or habitual basis. So if I wanted to say something like this, JP would play basketball on Fridays. Okay? Does that mean that I want you to construe the action as in process in the past? Or, some progressive action? No. All I'm indicating is that this was an action that he did on a habitual basis in the past, right? And I could use the Greek imperfect tense to do it. I could use imperfective aspect to portray it that way. All right. Now, I'm going to skip the completed and punctiliar notion here, because we'll talk about that when we get to the aorist. But I do want to just mention voice and mood here. Voice and mood. So when we think of voice, what we're dealing with in voice is we're dealing with the issue of how the subject relates to the verbal activity. And in English, we only have active and passive voice. In active voice, how is the subject related to the action? Okay, good. So subject performs the action. If it's an action verb, right? And if it's a stative verb, a verb that indicates a state, then the subject is the one being so described. So subject performs. If the verb was state of being? Yes. So like if I said something like John stinks, okay, that's not an action, is it? You can't watch somebody stink. But you can certainly perceive somebody who stinks, right? But John's still the subject of that verb. Okay. In passive verbs, how is the subject related to the action? Exactly. And so we could describe this using linguistic terms as the subject is the patient of the action. Think about what patients do in surgery. What do patients do in surgery? Nothing. That's right. The patient lies there and is acted upon by the doctor. That's right. Any of you ever woken up in the middle of a surgery? My sister-in-law once came out of whatever it was in the middle of a retinal surgery.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And
Did you release it?
what's that? No, she had a detached retina. And the doctor thought that she was not really all there. And so she started to explain to the doctor, because she knew the doctor, your family members are so and so and so and so. I need anesthesia now. Right? This is really weird. So, anyhow, so in English we have active and passive. What we learn in Greek, I'm sorry to say, is that there is something in between active and passive called middle voice. That makes sense, right? We'll stick it right in the middle. Middle voice. So what in the world is middle voice? That can be the case. Yeah. So in middle voice, the subject performs the action. All right. And also, somehow participates in the results of it. Is affected by it in some cases. So let me give you some examples of this. Now, again, we don't really have grammatical markings for voice in English, or for middle voice, okay? What we have to do is sometimes we have to add additional words or switch to new words that get across the concept. So, think about this. I washed my cat. That just sounds wretched. I washed my cat. Cats don't like to be washed very much, do they? Okay, passive. My cat was washed. Okay, so here the subject is cat. Oops, not was washed, but was washed. The subject is cat, but the cat is the patient of the verbal action. Not very patiently, I'm sure. Okay, active, I washed my cat. I am doing the washing. I'm the subject and I'm performing the action. Now, what would a middle sort of, semantically a middle sort of verb be that's related to both of these? It would be something like this. What's that?
My cat washed itself.
Yeah. How about this? I bathed. I bathed. What's going on here? Well, the cat drowned. So.
Oh my gosh.
No, I needed a verb that was transitive that could be made passive. Okay, so that's where the cat comes in. But in middle voice, a lot of people mistake middle voice for just being something like, I perform a transitive verb on myself. So I killed myself. I licked myself, right? But this verb, I bathed, doesn't have any object, at least no overt object, right? What I'm saying is I took a bath. Now, am I active in performing that action? Yes. Am I affected by that action by doing it? Yes. This is sort of the concept of middle voice semantics. Okay? And again, we don't really have a middle voice form in English, which makes it difficult to really grab a hold of Greek middle voice. And so, of all the voice forms, it's the least understood among those who aren't native Greek speakers. Yes?
If you rephrase that as I took a bath, is that then active or is that still middle?
In English grammar, the form is active, right? I took a bath. Of course, this is idiomatic because you're not taking a bath and putting it somewhere, right? But bath is the object of took in that sort of a form. But the semantics is what I'm trying to get at here, is that the semantics are middle in that I'm not bathing someone else, right? And no one else is bathing me. I'm doing it, and I'm also affected by the action I'm performing.
Can you, off the top of your head, give an example of like a verse that would be middle?
The last thing that Mounce talks about here is mood. Mood. And I don't know, I wonder what kind of mood we'll be in when we're all done. But mood here has nothing to do with your emotional state of being, okay? Mood is a property or feature of verbs that really has to do with the verb's relationship to reality versus irreality, non-reality. So the indicative mood is what we're going to learn first, and the indicative mood is the mood that's used, the form of mood that is used for making assertions and for asking questions. Okay? Some people do like to say that the indicative mood is the mood of what is, or you know, the mood of reality. This is what I just said. But we also have to be careful about that because when people lie, right, they're making assertions, but they're not true. Okay? But they're using indicative mood to do it. So you could describe indicative mood as the mood of assertion, not necessarily truthfulness. Okay. On the other hand, I can have imperative mood, and the imperative mood is the mood of command. So if I command someone to do something, eat more chicken, that's not an assertion of what is it? It's rather an expression of my desire for what should be, for what you should do. And then I can also speak in what's called subjunctive mood, and that is farther removed, as it were, from what is. And I could say things like, you know, if I were a rich man, yabba dabba 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 da, right? If I were. What is usually going to follow I when it's a form of to be? It's I was, right? But if you are using this conditional kind of statement for what you know is not the case, you would say if I were. If I were. Okay, and that's subjunctive mood in English. And that's removed from reality because I know I'm not. So did Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. Okay, so like I said, we're going to learn the indicative mood first, and then we'll go into these other moods. All right. Let me stop there with chapter 15, and we'll do a little bit of a break, and let's come back and we'll start looking at chapter 16.